Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm glad to hear my colleague from Virginia say that he wants to look into and possibly have a hearing on these cuts, and they are cuts, because when you put a cap on indirect costs, that causes a university research center to lose $26 million, as VCU in my district has estimated they will, or $13 million as Virginia Tech in the gentleman's district will, or $39 million that UVA in Virginia will, or additional cuts that James Madison, University of Richmond, Virginia State University, to the total for Virginia losing around $78 million in funding if a 15% across the board cap goes in place. I hope this hearing looks into the damaging effects that taking a chainsaw to something that needs a scalpel will have. Because a 15% across the board cut hits VCU very differently from Harvard. Because this cut's not in a vacuum. VCU doesn't have a Harvard-like or even a UVA-like endowment. VCU is one of the largest safety net hospitals in Virginia. Relies very heavily on Medicaid funding, which is going to be cut, as we've discussed earlier. Their student base relies very heavily on financial aid or scholarships. Many of them are first generation, non-traditional students who typically work while going. And so this cut, combined with the cuts to Medicaid, combined with the stress that are going to be on the Commonwealth of Virginia as they try to help fill this hole, to keep the research done with these grants from stopping. And what is it? I asked, go talk to your institutions that are doing this research. I did. And I asked, give me an example of something that you were worried is going to stop. And we talked about brain cancer. But not all brain tumors come from brain cancer. All cancers, when they metastasize, eventually result in brain tumors. That's what happened with my father when he had kidney cancer. And when you have radiation or chemotherapy, it is a broad, very debilitating treatment for sometimes a tumor that is as big as the tip of my pen. What killed my father was not the brain tumor. What killed my father ultimately was the effects of the treatment. But one of our institutions in Virginia has a clinical trial for targeted injection-based metastatic brain tumor treatment. And they don't know if they can continue it. And they don't have an endowment that they can go to. They don't have a rich alumni base that they can go to. They're already underfunded by the Commonwealth of Virginia, which has to balance its budget and can't print money. So when you think about all of these cuts, and when we look at the impact in our oversight role of all of these cuts, remember, they're not in a vacuum. And an across-the-board, one-size-fits-all cut is going to hit each of our constituents and each of our economies very differently, because in Virginia alone, NIH funding sustains over 7,000 jobs and adds nearly $1.73 billion of economic activity to our Commonwealth. That's just in Virginia alone. So I look forward to an oversight hearing with my colleague from Virginia on these cuts and how they intersect with the Medicaid cuts we're expected when we find $880 billion to fund tax cuts for billionaires. I yield back.